All right, we're back this week with Emma Cook from Enbridge. Emma, your job position is
I'm part of the community engagement team for Enbridge. I'm based out of our St. Ignace, Michigan office.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what do you do? What do you like? What does that mean? What's your job duty?
Wow, it's a lot of different things, but it's essentially just communicating our stuff that we do here at Enbridge out to the community, all external stakeholders, all that kind of stuff. It's really we're about transparency. My job's actually pretty newly created within the past 3 years, so it's all about promoting transparency on what we're doing.
So, how long have you worked for Enbridge? We were talking earlier, and I know you've worked for Enbridge longer than 3 years.
Yeah, so 3 years full time in my current role, and then I had 4 years of summer internships down in Marshall, Michigan.
Okay, so you were down there.
Yep.
So, what was your role down there? Were you actually helping with cleanup, or
So I was a lot of the administrative part
Okay.
of that, and then I spent 2 summers actually with the pipeline maintenance crew there in the PLM office. So
Uh-huh.
I got to see all aspects of the company through that.
Right. So you were in Marshall for 4 years.
4 summers, yeah.
4 summers.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was the summer breaks from college.
Oh, so you were in school.
Mm-hmm.
Where'd you go to school?
Madonna University,
Okay.
Livonia, Michigan.
Oh, yeah.
Go Crusaders.
Yeah, I've turned around in their parking lot many times.
Really?
I don't know why I end up turning around there, but a lot of one-way streets.
Yeah.
So obviously we're going to talk about Line 5.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, we had Jim Lively from Groundworks on a week ago, and he raised a lot of concerns about Line 5.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll just kind of go through those one at a time, and then kind of address them, and we'll let you talk about any other issues, that kind of thing, and there's some things I'm going to talk about as well, bring up. So, but first of all, let's just talk about the need for Line 5. Why is it there? Why do we have Line 5 running across the straits?
So it really fits into the larger regional energy market. If we want to get in the specifics of the benefits Line 5 brings to Michigan, we can just start with Rapid River, Michigan, up in the UP. So did you want me to go through
Sure.
the overall?
So what's Rapid River? It's like a propane. Something
Yeah.
to do with
So
propane?
Plains Midstream is a Canadian company there. They have a depropanizer right next to our facility where they pull off our natural gas liquids, and that's where the local and regional distributors, they come and pick up the propane and take it to their customers.
So they pull some product. I'm not a chemist or anything like that, but they pull some products. You said natural gas liquids.
Yep. So Line 5 is a batching line. It runs light crude oil or synthetic crude oil and natural gas liquids in batches.
Okay. So they'll pump one product for a little while, and then they pump a different product for a little while. And so then when they're pumping a certain amount of product, they're pulling it off, pulling natural gas liquids and turning it into propane.
Yep.
Yeah, I've done some work at like one of those plants before out in Wyoming where they turn it into propane.
They see like the big ball.
Yep. I've done work out
It's
at
the
a
most
site
identifying
in
feature, yeah.
Rock Springs, Wyoming.
Oh.
But so I'm familiar with I'm not familiar with the process, but kind of. So anyway, so they do that up in Rapid City in the UP.
Rapid River, yeah.
Rapid River.
It's just east of Escanaba.
Okay. And then they turn that product into propane.
Mm-hmm.
How much propane? Like can you give me quantities or like a percentage of the UP that's serviced by that propane?
It's about 65% of people who use their propane to heat their homes in the UP. It comes from Line 5. So
Oh, really?
65%, yeah.
You know what those numbers are?
I think it's about 2,600 barrels per day.
Okay.
Roughly, yeah.
So Jim had said that it's kind of just a fraction of a percentage, I think is the term you use, the amount of propane for the UP. Do you have any numbers on like if all of a sudden they shut that down and they had to bring in propane from another method via trucking or train car or something like that? Like what would it cost? What would be the price of the percentage increase of propane?
So it's a little bit difficult to nail down,
because
but
it's all market prices.
Yeah.
But it's probably safe to say that price would go up and probably fairly significantly.
Yeah, if we look back to, I think it was 2014, 2015, there was a propane shortage in the UP. Another one of their sources of propane, it wasn't Line 5 specifically, but they were having some issues, and it went from $1.50 to $6 a gallon. So that was a pretty significant shot up there, and it really
$6 a gallon.
that's what it was
my
in
God.
2014.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I had a house I heated with propane. It was a big old, poorly insulated house, and it was like even at two something, it was like $400 a month to heat this
Yeah.
monstrosity.
I grew up with propane at my house too.
Yeah, so I can't imagine $6 a gallon. So what other products come out of this? So we've established propane in the UP, but it comes from the Canada, right? So that really it doesn't necessarily need to cross the straits there, does it? I mean,
So the thing that a lot of people say a lot is Canadian oil for Canada's benefit, which is just not true. So the line runs light crude oil and synthetic crude oil, like I said, but it's oil from Canada, it's oil from North Dakota, and then we actually do unload Michigan production in Lewiston,
okay,
just not too far from here.
Right.
So it's about 80% of Michigan's production gets unloaded onto Line 5 there and carried to market. So there's some Michigan product in there too. It's
Right.
not just Canadian product.
right. Can you tell me, like, just out of the total volume, what percentage is used in Michigan? Do you know?
Of the product that runs through Line 5?
Yeah.
So if we're talking about crude oil specifically, the light crude in there, about a third of it is offloaded in Marysville, and then it's carried to Marathon, Detroit, and then the rest of it carries over into Sarnia. But there's some lines that come back into Michigan. Like I like to say, it's more of a regional market.
Right.
So just because it doesn't end in Michigan doesn't mean that we're not still using that
Right.
product.
Yeah, so they got certain formulation stuff that may happen in Canada, but then it comes right back to the United States and other products. Is that
Yeah,
safe to
the
say?
natural gas liquids that head over to Sarnia, there's 2 feeder lines that come back into Michigan, actually, that bring propane back. So I said 65% of the UP's propane comes from Line 5. If we're just looking at a statewide, it's about 55%. So
Yeah.
it's over half of the propane we use in Michigan, and Michigan is a huge consumer of propane.
Two points I want to make. Before we were talking, you had mentioned that actually it's not your oil, right?
Right, yeah.
You guys are just a pipeline company, and
Yep.
you get paid to move other people's product.
We're essentially like the public bus route for
Okay.
energy, yeah.
That's a good analogy. And then what's the total gallons that go on average? I mean, I'm sure it varies, but like per day, how many gallons or barrels, if you will? First of all, how many gallons in a barrel?
It's 43, I believe.
43, okay.
Yeah.
So how many gallons or barrels go through the Line 5 on average per day?
So it's 540,000 barrels per day.
Okay.
So I think that equates to
So we got a
almost
calculator.
23
540
million.
times 43.
I think it's 23 million gallons.
23 million
Yeah.
gallons. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
And it's mostly, what's the breakdown? Light crude. You'd mentioned what types of products were there.
Yeah. So the light crude, which can include like a synthetic crude or natural gas liquids.
Okay. Do you know the breakdown of that?
I don't, because like I said, we don't own it, so it's all dependent on the end user, the demand
Right.
there. So it can vary.
Do you know how much money that the pipeline pays, either through taxes, through any kind of use fees or permit fees, ongoing costs? Like what does the pipeline pay directly? And I'm not talking about indirectly through jobs and that kind of thing, but just pays directly to the state for the or entities of the state, like different townships and counties, whatever. What do they pay per year?
So in property taxes, just specifically property taxes, it's $60 million.
$60 million
A year,
in
yeah.
property taxes.
Mm-hmm. And I know specifically, and I just know this because I live in Mackinac County, but in Mackinac County alone, they pay $597,000
Okay.
a year.
Any other fees, or do they pay for access to state lands? I know that there's a bottom land lease if you're going to put in a marina that you have to do. Anything like that?
No, there's no costs that are associated with that. But another big use that we have is our electric utilities.
Uh-huh.
So in the UP, like UPCO, let's say, based up in Marquette, we're in their top 3 consumers. So
consumers of electricity.
yeah. So just in talking with UPCO, they've said, well, a lot of people don't realize that if we lose that customer,
Right.
it'll drive up the cost for the
Everyone's
rest of the
electric
customers.
rates will have to go up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how many people are employed with them in Michigan by Enbridge?
Just by Enbridge specifically, there's 102 to be exact.
102, and they're probably decent paying jobs. I'm sure you make a ton of money.
I think the number for 2017, we don't have the number for 2018, but salary was like $8 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've established that, it's a significant part of the economy and that the products are utilized. And if we shut that down, obviously we're going to probably pay more. So let's talk about if the pipeline weren't there and it's not like people are going to stop using products, right? Mm-hmm. If we were going to transport that same amount of product across the bridge using trucks, how many trucks per day do you think that would be?
So we actually broke it down just for fun one day, but it would be a truck over the Mackinac Bridge every 8 seconds, 24/7. Yeah.
Like a big semi-tanker.
Yep.
Every 8 seconds.
Yeah, just to keep up with that demand. And I mean, I cross that bridge a lot, and especially in the summer with the tourism traffic, nobody would want to be stuck on that bridge with all those tankers around it. Yeah.
It would probably increase revenue for the toll booth.
Yeah, that's true.
Right, there'd be a lot of toll money there. Yeah. And have you guys ever quantified? Because I'm in the environmental business. We do work on tanker truck rollovers all the time, and spills, and they have accidents all the time. Has there been any, and you guys had a spill down in Marshall, Michigan. Everyone agrees that was just catastrophic and it shouldn't happen. Hopefully nothing like that ever happens again. But it was like 1 million gallons of fuel. Have you guys done any studies, like if you transported all this fuel during tanker trucks, although there wouldn't be 1 million at a time, there'd be a lot of smaller ones, smaller accidents, and would that constitute more than 1 million gallons a year?
That's a really interesting question. I don't think that's
I like
ever...
to ask interesting questions.
That was a good one. I've never heard that question before.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's ever calculated that, but I know the state just commissioned, just talking about specifically with risk, they did a risk analysis last year, I think, is when it came out, and it determined that if you're comparing rail or trucking, pipelines are proven to be the safest way to transport.
If you're going to move a gallon of product from one place to another, the safest way to do that is via a pipeline.
Yep.
And, pipelines have problems on occasion, as we all know. But you do hear of, I'm in the environmental industry, so I'm probably a little bit more sensitive to it. But I hear about tanker trucks exploding all the time, and people getting burned, and they crash underneath a bridge or something. They got to close down the bridge for a long time because it basically melted the bridge, that kind of thing. And you do, like I said, you hear about pipeline stuff. So it's all about relative risk, that kind of thing. So let's talk about spills and risk in the Great Lakes. Have you guys ever quantified that? Like there'll be a spill from pipeline, the pipeline as it operates right now, once every 150,000 years or once every 150 years. I mean, sometimes they can quantify. I read something the other day, people are all worried about child abduction, and they're like, you could leave your kid in the mall for 150,000 years and your kid won't get kidnapped, But, I mean, it does happen because the combined total of kids in malls is a lot, But anyway, so anything like that?
I don't think that's been calculated either, no.
Okay.
Man, you got a lot of interesting questions.
Well, they calculate the risk of an earthquake. There'll be an earthquake every 100,000 years, or they'll look at faults. And anyway, so I just wondered.
Well, within that risk analysis, they also determined which would be the greatest risk to Line 5 in the Straits, and they determined that an anchor strike would be the greatest risk, and that was a 1 in 60 chance.
1 in 60 chance.
Yeah.
What would that do? Would it just poke a little hole in it, or you had shown me a piece of pipe?
Yeah, I have it here with me. Yeah, so In the Straits specifically, it's nearly an inch thick steel.
Right.
It's pretty sturdy steel.
Let me see that.
Yeah.
So this, I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's like easily 3/4 of an inch thick. It's heavier than heck, and it looks like it's pretty good grade steel. I'm not a metallurgist, but you can even tell the weld here is like pretty solid weld.
And that piece of pipe right there was in service for 62 years, so that is actually a piece of Line 5.
So this was sitting in the Straits or in water or something like that?
It wasn't in water.
Okay.
About 3 years ago now, we upgraded our Mackinac City pumping station, and when we did that, we pulled all the piping above ground. So I'm saying, well, we need to cut out a piece of that.
So everyone can see it.
Yeah, so people could see how thick and sturdy that is, because, I mean, that's the thickest piece of steel in our North American system.
So I'm a sailor, so I've been around a lot of anchors, and I don't know, I've yet to see an anchor that could actually poke a hole in that, but I guess a freighter probably could.
That was just what the study had determined, that an anchor strike was the greatest risk.
Right, and you had mentioned that they had just passed legislation in Michigan saying that you can't, like the whole Straits area is like a no anchor.
Yep. The Coast Guard was involved with that one, and it's a result of the April 1st anchor strike that happened that involved ATC. But as a result of that, they passed federal legislation deeming that a no anchor zone.
Yeah. So did they know what boat actually dropped an anchor on the thing?
Yeah, they did identify the boat, but I know the Coast Guard's still involved in their investigation.
What kind of boat was it?
It was a shipping company. I don't remember.
Oh, so it was like a big boat.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a recreational boat.
Yeah, they were coming from the Sioux Locks and heading towards Escanaba, but
They had some kind of trouble or something. And yeah.
Like I said, I don't know. The Coast Guard's still investigating, and they're supposed to come out with a report eventually. So we'll wait to see what they have to say.
It's interesting. Okay, so if there were, let's say, worst case spill, and I've heard that like the word, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if there were a spill, the worst case spill would be 1 million gallons. Is that correct?
There's been a lot of debate around that too. There's a lot of different studies out there. So, I mean, I can't accurately say for sure what the worst case spill would be.
Okay. So how many people would die if there were like a spill in the Mackinac Straits?
I would say none.
Yeah, no one would die.
Yeah.
Right. And so
we obviously still we're doing everything we can to make sure that never happens.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, it certainly would be catastrophic.
It would. Yeah, catastrophic is a correct word to
but,
use there.
You know, I mean, how many people died in Marshall?
None.
None. Okay. And then my point of asking that question is like we all take calculated risks every day. You know, we already know that a certain amount of people are going to die driving cars or getting on an airplane. Just statistically, they happen. But you know, we know no one's going to die if there's a spill. Again, catastrophic, but it would be bad for the environment. But you know, worst case scenario, still nobody dies. So, so tell me, you know, I've seen some of the studies where they put the little balls in the, or not balls, but there's some animation showing that the worst case spill and how fast this oil would spread, and obviously it's going to depend on the wind direction at the time. Do you guys have any studies like that kind of counteract what you saw floating around on the internet a few years ago?
Yeah, that's actually involved in one of the state's studies. They broke down. There was a few different levels of of what a spill would look like in the Straits.
Right.
And there's a current modeling system out there right now that's tracking the currents. Everybody knows the currents in the Straits are pretty unpredictable,
Right,
but
right.
yeah, they're trying to model that with relation to the weather, and
Right.
so we're constantly doing research out there.
Right. The economic impact of a spill, right? So if we had a spill, are there any studies on like the economic impact of
Not
like
that
what
I
would
know
happen
of.
to like tourism? Obviously, if the beaches are coated in oil, no one wants to go to the beach.
Right.
But so you were in Marshall,
Mm-hmm.
and this might be a little sensitive topic for you, but I'll bring it up. That spill was probably the best thing to happen to the economy in Marshall, Michigan in 2000. When did it happen? 2008?
2010.
2010, when the economy was horrible. And I know, we work all over the state, and I couldn't get a hotel room within a mile of Marshall, Michigan for about a year and a half because
Wow.
every hotel was booked.
Yeah.
And I even had some meetings down there, and we go into restaurants. You have to wait an hour to eat on like a weekday, and because the place was packed, right? So I mean, I'm just saying, like, and I've heard people, and I've stories that like, there was such an influx of money into that economy. So my point is, if the same thing happened up in the Straits area, there would be this mass mobilization of people. Hotel rooms would all be booked. Restaurants would all be booked. Charter fishing boats would probably all be employed by Enbridge to be doing various things, not fishing, but doing other things. So, I just don't, I've heard people say how it's going to, ruin the economy in northern Michigan, and I just have a hard time, as if you only look at the one side of that equation, you can say, yeah, but there's another side of that equation. That's going to be the amount of money that gets spent. Probably not a politically correct position to be taking, saying that it might be actually good for the economy. If it happened in the middle of summer, it would probably be a wash. But if it happened in the shoulder seasons or in the winter, it probably would actually be a boost for the economy. Again, you don't even have to comment on that.
Well, yeah, I can't really speak to that specifically, but
Right.
I know when Marshall did happen, and everybody that you talk to at Enbridge will say that is the darkest day in our company's history.
right.
But
I
we
agree.
are all very proud of how Enbridge stepped in and said, we are cleaning this up on our dime. We are doing this the right way.
Yeah.
Um,
And clearly they lost their ass on that. It wasn't like they, or like had a spill and were like, hey, we made money. And they, last I heard, it was like $1 billion,
Yeah.
and they still had another $500 million to go, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. It's
Just
roughly.
because they're going to do a lot of long-term studies and
Yeah, we still have people down there that are monitoring
Right.
The water quality. And
yeah, $1.5 billion. And again, you guys don't actually own the oil; you're just a transport company. So, I don't have any facts in front of me, but I would assume that you aren't as rich as everyone makes you out to be, as in terms of a company, because it's not your oil; you're just the bus driver. So, I just want to address the economic impact, and that it's probably not going to ruin the economy up there. Again, it could be either a wash or actually a net positive in terms of dollars into that community. Again, not saying it would be a good thing, but
definitely would not be.
definitely,
but
it's a touchy subject to be
yeah.
talking about economics. That's the name of the podcast,
Yeah.
EnviroNomics. But there's how it all works together.
But like you said, there's inherent risk in everything you do in life, and I
Right.
think that's
Right.
one of the big drivers behind why we've committed to the tunnel project is
And Enbridge,
driving that risk down.
Enbridge carries insurance, right?
Yeah. Our insurance is about $900 million.
So that's what the policy limit is. Like you got
Yeah, that
900
wouldn't be what we're specifically responsible for.
Right.
But that's our insurance.
Right.
Yeah.
So if it went over $1 million, you just have to pull
Yeah.
it out of your pocket, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But you got a $900 million insurance policy on a spill in the Straits.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know what it would cost up there, but I guess it would probably depend on the quantity and how fast you responded.
Mm-hmm.
But I recently attended a trade show here in Michigan. I think you were there too. I know you were there. I saw you.
Yep.
And there's this drone there that is, I know these guys too. They got a drone that carries a submersible drone. So it's an aerial drone, submersible drone. And their claim is that they could get a camera on any part of that pipeline within 30 minutes. So I know you saw that as well.
Yeah, I was extremely impressed by that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting piece of technology. And I know that they're brand new, so you probably haven't deployed that there. But
yeah,
seems like if you're going to have some problems there, obviously response time and response activities are key. If you do have a ship that lost control and had to drop an anchor and hit the thing, tell me about how like Enbridge would respond to something like that.
So we do have a crew in St. Ignace. So we have people manned
by crew,
there.
what do you mean? Like
we have a 5-man PLM crew.
What's PLM stand for?
Pipeline maintenance.
Okay. And so their job is to just be ready in case of any kind of an event, and
that, and we also have OSROs that are contracted. TNT Marine is one of them.
Okay.
MPC.
So these are companies that have the equipment and the manpower to respond in a very short notice if there is a problem.
Yeah, I wish I would have brought it with me, but we actually have a map of our response times throughout all of North America, but we are never over a 1-hour response time.
Okay. And so you guys practice this?
Yep.
Okay.
We had a full-scale exercise in the Straits specifically in 2014 or 15.
Okay.
Yeah, there was thousands of people there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have written what are called SPCC plans, spill prevention control and countermeasure plans. So I know that you are required by law to have certain assets in place, like boats and booms and enough to respond to spills there, right? So you have all that equipment on standby. You've got boats really ready to launch in a moment's notice.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've rented space. You could throw them in the water and get them out there.
Mm-hmm.
And you do maintenance. You like go out there every week and fire up these boats just to make sure they're going to run, right? And is that correct?
We do keep up on our equipment, but I will say, in the past few years, we've actually invested $7 million in Michigan in emergency response, specifically equipment.
Okay.
And a lot of it is really state-of-the-art stuff that was tested out in the North Sea.
Right.
We actually, our latest investment was in this, it's called Sea Sentry Boom.
Mm-hmm.
So it's tested out in the sea in open water. It's an open water containment boom.
Right. So it's a boom that essentially is partially underwater.
Yeah,
partially
it's
above
anchored.
water.
Yeah, it has an anchor underneath.
So if oil's floating, you can be pretty thick and it'll still contain it all, even in bigger waves.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the Straits can be an unforgiving.
I've sailed through there many times.
So instead of just having our normal boom, we invested in this Sea Sentry boom that can handle the waves and the currents a little better.
Okay. So you it's not like you're just waiting for a casual observer to report something and then it would take days to respond. It would be a quick response. Yeah. What would they do? Shut the pipeline down, start sucking oil out of it? I mean, tell me about that.
So our control center, which was completely updated as a result of Marshall, actually, they're monitoring our systems 24/7.
Right.
So they can tell the instant that the pressure drops in the line. And we have automatic shutoff valves. So there doesn't have to be somebody there cranking the valve. They can hit a button and the valves will shut. And it takes about 3 minutes for the valve to shut.
Right. And correct. Speaking of valve shutting, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I heard about happened in Marshall was somebody shut a valve too fast or something like that. Do you know how that happened?
The line was shut down, and sometimes when the lines are shut down, they get these air columns in the product. So if there's a drop in pressure, sometimes they'll think, well, that's what it is. It's an air column, so they'll up the pressure. So that's what happened there. But as a result of that, like I said, we completely updated our
all new sensors, all new technology.
The emergency shutoff valves. You can't, like I said, you can't go and undo it. It's
too fast.
Yeah.
And the reason they like shutting a valve too fast is you've got literally millions of gallons of product moving and with momentum, and if you quickly shut down a valve, it's like a train trying to stop. Literally the pressure at the valve can get extreme because of all that weight behind it and momentum.
Yeah, so it's a sequence that they shut
you have
down.
to kind of shut them down in sequence, right? And to avoid all that that high pressure from shutting it too fast.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got this new technology up in the straits and everything, and my point is like because of Marshall, Enbridge has a little bit of a credibility crisis. You know what I mean? There, people, and it's natural, right?
Yeah.
Something happens, like, somebody had a car wreck, then you're a little hesitant to get back in the car with them if they're not a good driver, and so it's a natural reaction that people just kind of maybe are a little more skeptical about, upgraded sensors, and so you said that they went through and they've already completed all these upgrades to the sensors. It's all done.
Yep. The shutoff valves are in at the straits. They're on either side, so you could isolate those twin lines there.
Is there like Is there two lines there?
Which was actually the engineering of this line was magnificent. So it's a 30-inch line as it crosses the UP, and then it gets to the straits, splits into two 20-inch lines, and then meets back into a 30-inch on the south side there. But that was by design to run at a lower pressure under there, because in a pipeline system, the lowest pressure is right before your pump station, which are pump stations in Mackinac City. So you split those two lines, your lowest pressure is there in the straits.
Okay. So it's not just one line, it's two lines kind of divergent. So really, if there was an anchor, it's probably not going to take both of them. It's just going to take half of one or half of the line, right? I mean,
I really couldn't speculate on that. Yeah.
Right. But let's talk about, go back to the response. How would you let's say you had a line leak or something like that. The valves are gonna shut off. If both valves are shut off on either side, do you know what the total volume that could possibly leak? Is there any way to like suck oil out of it?
That's a rough thing to guess. Yeah, I don't have the number specifically.
And I also heard, and you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, that if there is a leak at like the lowest part of the, because it's under, how deep is that there? Like
250 feet at the deepest point.
Feet?
Yeah.
It's 6 psi per 10 feet of water. Somebody want to do the math for me there? But so it's a pretty substantial. I heard somebody say that at the lowest point, that if there is a leak, that water will actually leak into the pipe versus out of the pipe.
That's obviously not been tested, but I've heard that as well. That's an interesting theory.
Right.
I think.
Do you know what the pressure is in at the center of the straits?
That line in the straits on average is running 80 to 100 psi.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
225 times 6. What is that? Come on, guys. Does anyone know? 10 feet of water is 6 psi ballpark.
Yeah, but like I said, that's by design.
Make sense that the pressure at the lowest point would be actually higher of the water than it inside the pipe. So.
That's very possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so that eliminates like a big section of the pipe from actually having a catastrophic leak, because it would actually be the opposite direction, be water leaking into the pipe versus the other way around.
Like I said, that hasn't been tested. Yeah.
Get back with me on that, will you?
Yeah, I'll ask the experts.
It's an interesting, scientific principle there that if you have a hole in it, it's not going to actually leak because it's going to go the other way. So, which is, it's a fact. If it's true, it would be a kind of interesting concept to make sure that everyone's aware of.
Yeah, and like I said, it's 80 to 100 psi, and 2 summers ago now we did a hydro test on the line back to its original hydro test that it was when it was put in. It was 1600 psi for 8 hours, and it held. So you think 80 to 100 psi versus being tested for 8 hours at 1600 or 1200?
Yeah, taking a look at that piece of pipe you showed me, it doesn't surprise me it would hold 1600 psi. So.
Yeah.
All right, so somebody brought up to me the other day that the Straits area, right? Obviously, everyone's aware of that line 5 going across the Straits. I mean, big issue. But they mentioned that it also line 5 crosses like 10 or 12 different rivers and tributaries going along US 2, kind of in the UP as it goes towards Escanaba. Let's talk about that. I mean, so that would be a scenario similar to what happened in Marshall. You got all these like river crossings, and if you had a spill there, well, could just mimic what happened in Marshall, and it would be in Lake Michigan in a matter of no time. Address that.
Yeah, so in our agreements with the state of Michigan, We actually did address the water body crossings because that is another concern, and ultimately the goal of all these agreements was to protect the waters of Michigan. And so we're going through these different water body crossings, and we're doing environmental surveys, and we're going to see what additional safety measures we can put in. We're actually going to be doing an HDD in the Western UP here next year. So
What's a HDDD?
horizontal directional drill.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're going to take the pipes right now on the bottom and they're
of
going to
the river, and it's
bore it
just going
under,
to be
yeah.
underneath the river. Okay. How deep, do you know?
No, I mean, we're in the initial phases of that right now, but
Right.
that was another commitment through those agreements with the state of Michigan, was to go in and reassess these water body crossings.
Okay. And do you know how many there are?
I don't have that number off the top of my head. Just
Right.
specifically in the UP, I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That assessment is not done yet? You're still working on it?
Yeah, we're going through and assessing all of them. It's going to take a while, obviously, but we did elevate 2 that are our top priority.
Okay. So let's now talk about the tunnel. This new tunnel that
Yeah.
Governor Snyder approved. There's been some criticism of how that was happened during a lame duck session. As I mentioned when I was talking to Jim Lively, lame duck sessions, I don't care who's in control of the party, they always tend to be a little sketchy. And so, so let's talk about how it was passed. And, some are saying it was, through the dark of night it was signed and passed. And then we'll talk about the technical aspects of the tunnel. So regarding how it got passed and everything, lame duck session, there's some challenges to that?
Well, how it was passed was there was some legislation that created an actual authority, the Mackinac Straits Corridor Authority, that would be our partner in this project. So we're bearing the cost of the project. The $500 million is estimated right now, but they're helping to be an overseeing entity. So they're going to be like our partner in that. So that's what that legislation specifically created.
Mm-hmm.
And they appointed 3 members to it.
Right. Let's talk about the technical aspect. I mean, Jim Lively, when he was on here, he basically conceded that the tunnel is going to be a safe alternative. And you tell us about the dimensions of the tunnel and how long it's going to take and how long will the tunnel be?
So how long will the length of the tunnel be?
Yeah.
It'll be under the entirety of the straits.
Right.
I don't have roughly 4
it's
to
like
5
5
miles.
across the strait. So I don't know. I'm kind of getting at where is it going to go in at? Is it like a mile inland or a quarter mile inland? Or?
It's right by our facilities, which I would guess maybe a quarter mile. I don't know
so
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it might be 5 or 6 miles long.
Yeah.
And then what's the diameter of this thing?
So right now they're talking, and like I said, we haven't gotten into the design phase yet, but they are talking about a 10-foot tunnel inside, and then it's going to be a foot of concrete, so 12 feet in diameter total.
Okay, so the outside diameter is 12 feet.
Yeah.
Inside
10
feet.
So the concrete itself is going to be a foot thick.
And like drive a pickup in this thing, rail car, what?
There's going to be some sort of way for our people to get through there. What that looks like, I don't know. Like I said, we haven't gotten into the design phase yet,
Right.
but there'll be a way for our people to get down there and do maintenance on the line if needed.
Right, they're probably doing geotechnical studies to kind of really finalize, before they finalize the design, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so we just received our permits this week to start our geotech work this spring.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it must be pretty good bedrock down there. I'm a geologist, so in order to support those columns for the bridge, it's got to be pretty solid down there. So
yeah, we just don't have that information yet,
Right.
so that's what we're going to be doing this spring.
Yeah, and what side of the bridge is that going to be on?
The west side.
West side of the bridge, kind of right where the pipes are right
Mm-hmm.
now. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense. You probably don't want to have to build all new infrastructure on
Yeah.
land. Yeah.
And we have our facilities on the other side right now. The pumping stations, those are.
Right.
I mean, they're
Yeah,
still
you don't
going to
want
be
to
there.
move those. Yeah.
You asked about the timeline.
The timeline.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about that.
So they're guessing the estimated timeline was 7 to 10 years, but we think if we can get through the permit phase relatively easily, we don't have any challenges, that we can get it done in 5.
5 years.
Yeah. So I know that's a big criticism. Is 7 to 10 years is too long, and we're committing to driving the risk down in the straits as close to zero as we possibly can. So help us get it done in 5.
Right. So if the more legal challenges, the longer they delay everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll make it more difficult.
So the more legal challenges, the more roadblocks put in front of you, the longer actually
I-
if you continue to operate, because they're trying to get you to shut the pipe tight, but shut it down until the tunnel's built.
Yeah, and then you think you don't get all those benefits that come from Line 5 that
Right.
we need every
Propane
day.
goes
Yeah.
up, a bunch of stuff, cost goes up. So if they delay the building of the tunnel, that essentially increases the time period that there's potential risk and threat. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just a fact, and
So
like
the
I said,
reality
it's
is, like, if you want to minimize the risk, you should help speed
us
this
get
thing.
it done. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, Emma, it's been a pleasure.
It's been a
to speak
pleasure to
with
be
you.
here.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.